Hey students, this is the next video on sustainable agriculture. So in the previous videos we were talking about some solutions to pests and to insects, and we were talking a bit about the genetic modifications that you could do with Bt corn and wheat. Genetically modified food in general is just any organism that you are editing its DNA. In other words, you're taking it and manipulating it for particular reasons that might benefit you, like increased yield or sustainability of that particular organism. What you do is you typically take one piece of DNA from one organism and you put it into another, and that produces uh, an organism with multiple sets of DNA or pieces from DNA of other organisms. To create Roundup Ready soybeans, for example, scientists transferred a gene from a soil bacterium, Agrobacterium termfacin, that codes an enzyme that is insensitive to a pesticide. So when you spray a pesticide, it doesn't kill the Roundup Ready soybeans. So that's good. The gene expression is regulated by three other genes, one from Agrobacterium, one from Petunia, and another from California mosaic virus. I don't know why I said Petunia. It's Petunia. So three different organisms in one genome. So kind of like traditional breeding and kind of not. In principle, it's basically you're altering plants and animals just like artificial selection, where you are making one plant breed with another, one dog breed with another, except you're doing it in a lab and you're manipulating the DNA yourself. The technique is slightly different in that way. You also create combinations of genes in a more direct way, obviously, that would not be possible with breeding. Biotechnology is transforming products all around us. So you have golden rice, which is a huge breakthrough increasing vitamin A in Asia and developing world that helped many kids actually see or at least uh, you know, miss the fear of being blind. And Bt corn is Bacillus thuringiensis uh, is the Bt corn. It's or Bt cotton. It's basically the idea that the insecticide is actually in the plant now, not have to be sprayed on. Others, GM salmon, as we said, it was the first FDA approved genetically modified organism. Biotech soy, sugar beets, potatoes, corn, as we said, sunflower seeds, those things. Five countries, the US, Brazil, Argentina, India, and Canada, account for 90% of the production of GM crops. Very few countries with a lot of the percentage there. Again, soybeans being the biggest percentage with 50, corn, and then cotton. And again, the United States being the largest GM crop producer. Benefits: enhance food security and reducing poverty, alleviate pressure for clearing forests. You could have more density as a result, more production. Conserving water, therefore, by reducing the need for irrigation. You could have drought resistant plants or um, plants that require less water. Improve nutrients or nutrition. Example, golden rice again with vitamin A, and reducing pesticide application. Overall, the meta-analysis, which means you look at like hundreds of different studies on genetically modified crops. If you look at all those across the board, they found in one particular meta-analysis that that you found a 22% increase in yield, boosting profits by 68% for farmers and reducing pesticides by 37%. Overall, pesticides have decreased, but using herbicides is not perfect. It also increased um, the herbicides, particularly increased actually in areas where Roundup Ready corn was planted. And herbicide use is also growing because many weeds are developing resistance to the Roundup Ready plants. What are the risks? So they haven't detected any, scientists haven't detected any significant health risks. Ecologically, however, they're concerned about GMOs inbreeding with wild relatives, transferring genes to the wild population of organisms. Um, but right now, it still seems to be a precautionary tale, sort of, you know, fearing the worst, and we therefore shouldn't proceed until the effects are fully understood. Um, and public is still debating on this. It's a big part of public debate that every person relies on food for survival, genetically modified crops like rice, corn, and soy. And another concern is that a few companies are in control of this: DuPont and Monsanto and Bayer and Dow and DAS. All of those are major companies and only a few, and they have a lot of power. I'm not going to go into a Monsanto Protection Act. Uh, it's biotech companies are now patenting seeds. We talked about this in class, but we'll go over it in class a little bit more. 60 nations require genetically modified organisms to be labeled, but the United States does not. And 2015, there was a dark act passed by the House of Representatives to remove the rights of states to require labeling, but it didn't pass the Senate. All right, so we talked a lot about organic farming when we talk about using um, fertilizers, particularly organic fertilizers. Well, what does organic mean? Organic describes a food that's grown in practices typically not including any synthetic pesticides or fertilizers, hormones, or antibiotics. Those four things. The Organic Food Production Act of 1990 established the national standards and created a label, as you probably see in a lot of the organic foods in your local grocery store. This particular label here, the 1990s when it was enacted. Um, Largest obstacle to buying organic food for most people is just the price. If you compare, a thing of raspberries, it's organic to not, it's amazing. It's upwards of 30-40% more expensive. Milk can even cost twice as much. Um, these are all the different requirements for being organic. Land must be free of prohibited substances for 3 years. So even if you want to do organic, you have to wait 3 years. Crops must be not be genetically engineered. Must be eradicated, kill bacteria, irradiated. Um, and then livestock feed must be 100% organic, although vitamin and mineral supplements are allowed. Dairy cows must receive 80% organic feed. So it's not just even the you know the the fertilizers and things that we use for plants. We're thinking about animals. It's what you're feeding them as well. Organic agriculture is on the rise, as you can see here. 80% of Americans buy organic now, at least occasionally, and production and demand are growing. A meta-analysis of this, again, a group of studies that have been out found that organic agriculture produces yields of roughly 80% of those of conventional agriculture. So what that means is that it doesn't produce as much, and that's where you often get the increased costs. So organic farmers can't produce as much yield, and to offset that, they have a higher price. So can organic agriculture support world population? Yes, but only if food waste and meat consumption are reduced. Um, that way, we'll be able to um, bring down the price and carbon footprint, and um, yeah, so it's important. Sustainable food production. So we can't just think of one solution, we have to think of a lot of different solutions. Biotechnology does play a role in the future of sustainable food production. Challenges still are are abound. We have soil degradation and overconsumption of water, reliance on fossil fuels and greenhouse gas emissions, and overall loss of pollinators and habitats and diversity. So, what can we do? What can you do? You can shop at farmers markets. You can sign up for a CSA, a community supported agriculture, where you have farmers who give you a share, um, and then you receive a weekly delivery of plants or animals. Um, Buying local is really good too. Um, Food miles alone may not be an accurate way of gauging fossil fuels, as large shipments by barge and rail may use less fossil fuels than a small local truck. So, in other words, shipping across seas might actually be a bit more efficient in terms of energy, actually. And you also want to make sure that you're not just looking at, the transportation, but looking at the larger picture of the whole life cycle of inputs and outputs that a particular food has. So food miles, greenhouse gas emissions from feedlots and farms. Um, you know, we want to take a look at the impact on the environment, and so when we do the best sustainable agriculture, what we're really doing is getting back to what we know that nature does so well. Ecosystems use cycles and negative feedback loops, and this is a great model for agriculture. Um, uh, Engano rice farming in Japan is a classic example. This is where you're planting your rice. Angamo ducklings are released into the water paddies above, and the ducklings are eating weeds that compete with the rice, and insects and snails that eat the rice. And then the waste of the ducklings falls, and then it becomes the fertilizer for for the plants. And also the paddling helps to mix up the water and increase oxygen, dissolved oxygen. And then the ducks are removed and sold when the rice forms grains. And this is a sort of feedback loop that's created here. And this is really what we want to see. We want to see a feedback loop that supports each step in a natural fashion. And the end result is a high productive ecosystem where pests and weeds are transformed into resources for organisms, um, and you can produce a lot of food.